Chapter 1, Intro to Technology and Physical Education. This is the first chapter in Using Technology in Physical Education, the required textbook from Bonnie Mostyn. Once a school acquires the technology, its applications for physical education are limited only by the imagination of the user. When we talk about technology in physical education, there's a lot of different things we can consider. It's not just computers. It can be, as this photograph shows you, it could be biofeedback or biometrics. It could be a simple cordless microphone for the teacher in the front of the room. It could be a heart rate monitor, Dance Revolution, or even cardio machines here in the back of a fitness center. Again, this is a game bike, so you're competing against the person on the screen or against yourself. Here's Wii Fit, Wii Soccer, Wii Tennis, Kinect, another extra gaming game, and over here, of course, is Dance Revolution. So those are all considered parts of technology in physical education. When you look at this chapter, it's broken down into a number of different parts, and this presentation will also be broken down into various parts. The first would be Introduction to Technology in Physical Education, and then we'll talk about the growth of technology, the types of technology, why to use it, what should you know, how do you learn all of it, and how do you get the technology. And finally, the last part, which is not included in this slide, would be the ergonomics of using technology. So first we'll start with the definition. If we go to Webster's dictionary, technology can be defined as a scientific method of achieving a practical purpose. When you talk about physical education, technology is anything that helps your students improve their physical performance, their social interaction, or their cognitive understanding of physical education concepts. So just because you have the technology doesn't mean you have to use it, but if you can use it to focus on any of the three domains, or hopefully all three, then you've got a really great tool to use in your classroom. And remember, our discipline is the only one that touches all three domains. Every other class talks about cognitive, but ours also talks about the social interaction, which is the affective, the thoughts, the feelings, the sportsmanship, those things, and also the physical performance, the psychomotor. That, of course, is not evident in most other disciplines. When we discuss the growth of technology, we'll talk about the history and then where we are today. In the 1960s, technology was first used basically with pilots in flight simulators to train, because it was obviously very dangerous to learn on the job. So they had flight simulators so pilots could learn in a controlled environment. Again, that was in the 1960s, probably when your parents were born. The school districts installed computer terminals and special rooms in the schools, and then these computers were linked to a mainframe system located in the district office or some other central location. It's not at all what you think about today for computers. In fact, this picture in the corner of the slide shows you actually what a computer looked like back then. It was about half the size of a wall. So very different than what you know of computers today. If you wanted to use the computers back in the 60s, the teachers would sign up for the computer room, and then they would take their class there to use. It did not last very long because the machines were very expensive and they were often broken down and not working. So you didn't want to plan a lesson using the computers and then not having the computers available for that lesson. And as a result, very few physical educators used it because there really was nothing for us in our discipline to use computers in the 1960s. So that's the beginning of computers. In the 70s and 80s, which is when I was in school and probably your parents as well, they started with computer-assisted instruction. And this coincided with the appearance of the personal computer. So if you had your own computer, you'd be able to use the software in various ways and various techniques, and computer-assisted instruction was one of those. Because we now had these personal computers, you could bring them into the classroom, you could bring them into the gymnasium, you could bring them into the homes because they were less expensive, they were smaller, and they had more capability for most people. In physical education, it was basically the university professors who started to use technology and computers because they were the ones that started to develop the software for the different specialty areas like exercise physiology, exercise science, fitness, those areas. The first time it was used in K through 12 was primarily for fitness reports. and then gradually other types of application software was developed. But even now, fitness reports are used in the schools, and it is one of the ways that we can use technology. But you may see this question on a quiz or an exam if I ask you, what was the first use of technology in physical education? It would be with fitness reporting back in the 70s and 80s. Fast forward to the 90s and beyond, that's when the internet exploded. We have a whole chapter on the internet later, so I won't go into too much depth. You don't know of a world without the internet, but your parents and I can certainly remember a time when we did not have it. More recently, the creation of the National Education Technology Standards were developed. They're called NETs, and they were developed by the International Society for Technology and Education, which is called ISTE, if you take the abbreviation. I go to the ISTE conference every summer. I have for the last 3 or 4 summers. 18,000 people from around the world, all interested in educational technology. And it's a phenomenal conference for someone like me interested in using technology in the classroom. This organization has developed NETs. This is the National Education Technology Standards for students in 1998, for teachers 2 years after that, and finally for administrators in 2001. So it's important to know when you're out there teaching and they talk about standards, and they might talk about technology standards, if they use the term NETs or if they use the term ISTE, it's important to know what that is and how that was developed. Currently, today, there are computers of all sizes. We've got computers in our pockets with the 3G, 4G networks on our smartphones. We've got DVDs, we've got all sorts of technologies. What was really interesting is recently, after the Computer Electronics Show in January of this year, they talked about in this blog how stores like Best Buy will have lots of empty shelves because so many of their standalone technology has now all been put into one gadget or one device, like an iPhone or an iPad. And we're talking about things like cameras, video recorders, sound recorders, GPS systems, all of those things that do have standalone technology, you can now all get into one gadget. So most people are opting for that one thing, like a smartphone or an iPad, instead of a separate camera or a separate video camera or audio recorder or GPS system. So it has definitely changed just in the last few years. The internet, of course, has exploded. You can find everything on the internet, and it's huge. And in our discipline, most physical educators have moved beyond using a computer just for fitness reports. I think you know that. We use it at all levels for everything from all sorts of instructional software. There's online physical education. Some of our recent grads have gotten jobs as cyber school teachers of physical education. There's heart rate monitors. There's video analysis of performances with software like Dartfish and free stuff on the iPad. Electronic portfolios, which you will create. And there's all sorts of multimedia development on student learning. So there's a ton of explosion of technology, and we can use all that in physical education. Just because we teach in a gymnasium and that's our classroom, that doesn't mean that we can't use technology in what we do. For physical educators, the early 2001st century were an area of exploration and promises to come. If you look at this chart, it's not in your book, but it was in one of the earlier editions of Bonnie Mostyn's book, and it's really interesting. In 1986, I was a student. As I was saying, in 1986, I was a student at Slippery Rock University. I was sitting in room 119 like you are for class, and I didn't have a computer class. Never had a computer class until I was in my doctoral or my master's program. But in 1986, a computer would have 1 megabyte of RAM. It would have 40 megabytes of storage. The speed was 15 megahertz, and it would cost $2,500. We had some computer labs on campus. I never actually went to one. 1996, 10 years later, I came back to Slippery Rock as a faculty member in 96. At that point, 8 megabytes of RAM. I had a computer in my office. This was probably the specs. 500 megabytes of storage, 100 megahertz of speed. It cost $1,000 less than it did 10 years earlier. And the power was twice as much as it was in 86. 4 years later, in just 4 years, it jumped to 51 megabytes of RAM, 3.2 gigabytes of storage. You can look at the speed. and the cost drastically was reduced for that amount of power and speed and storage. And then 2012, more recently, you can get 13 gigabytes of RAM on a computer and 800 gigabytes of storage, 9 terahertz of speed, and all of that would cost you $10 if you broke it down. And of course, the power would be 600 times what it was in 1986. So a lot has happened over your lifetime, and certainly even before you were born in the area of technology. But we're just getting started. There's so much more out there that we don't even know and we can't even envision. Okay, I will pause and end the first part of the lecture, and we'll pick up with types of technology.